let's start this lesson. Today we have a new topic and some theoretical discussion about it. I don't plan coding together, but I will explain prepared code ahead of the time. So where we are. In week 1, I posted class plan, and I later updated, so it's not week 1, it's probably week 3, but it's still linked to week 1. So I'm sticking to original plan to have reasonably extensive Firebase discussion in the end, because most programs do share data on cloud, at least for one user, because users tend to have more than one device or want to access the same data from web. So at least for this reason, most applications share data some way on cloud. So even if like user lost device or got new device installed, it's the same app, the user will have the same data. So it makes a lot of sense. And it does have a lot, quite not inconvenient, but intensive learning curve. So it does require several weeks to talk about it before you have assignment. About final exam, since midterm is gone, let's aim to final exam what is going on. For final exam, I don't want to put Firebase because it's still a little tricky. And also it requires more effort in grading because I will have to deal with two sides of your program, Firebase and cloud side and your application side. For this reason, final exam will not contain Firebase, but you will have quite extensive assignment that will contain it. It's not doing everything like inventing from scratch. It will be based on given examples, definitely. Like our previous program, it will be somewhat similar examples, but not copy-pastable directly. Like your assignment 2, for example. It's not exactly the same, definitely, but it is quite close. So this is the plan for assignment 4. So what about practical part? Theoretical part will be some slides posted, some will be repeated from already existing slides. So it's a mixture of new stuff and already known stuff. So it will be easier to prepare because half of it is already known. So it will be half and half from midterm and half extra. So if we assume like 15 questions, about 7 will be new. Okay. And it will be slides for it, and it will be quiz before, so it's not a big deal. But using Firebase for final exam, it is too much effort for grading, and it's also too much risk because it is quite complicated structure of the project. So for this reason, it won't contain it. So it cannot be based on assignment 4. So we have only assignment 3 left, right? Kind of preparation to practical part of final exam. So practical part of the final exam will be sort of similar to assignment 3. So since assignment 3 is soon, let's talk about assignment 3. Definitely it should contain extra information compared to assignment 2 from theoretical point of view. In assignment 2, you had a database, you had assignment asking you to store some user data in database. I believe it was shopping list data in one table. And I told you that it's probably will be some of it repeated later when we talk about the loading data from internet. We will have such example, and this example will be getting problems in math program, getting problems from a server. So a server generates problems, it gets this and displays it. And after this, you'll have a local copy, placed with local copy after that. So this will be covered that way using math example. And I believe this is good enough for that part. So you will have some sense of getting data stored in local copy and after this manipulating the local copy. I don't plan extending other examples for that. And since assignment 3, I plan to have somewhat similar to what is on the final exam, and on the final exam you have limited time, it won't be part of assignment 3. So in assignment 3, I will be asked to get data from web and just display it. So essentially, it is like a PET example, latest version of PET example. That was already discussed before midterm, video recorded in details, and I spent the entire lesson almost discussing it, so it should be reasonably clear. So for assignment 3, it will be JSON file posted on cPanel and images posted on cPanel. Similar to data example where data is coming from cPanel is JSON, and images are just some addresses to images. And it's another program, another library, coil library to get images from them. So it is assignment 3, similar to PET example, already discussed and video recorded, with no local copy. Image loading program is storing local copy for images, but it happens automatically. Okay, it's default behavior. Okay, but it will not be a requirement to get the local copy. For what reason? Because on final exam you don't have enough time to code it, and I want to have something really similar. From previous experiences, if it were final exam a lot simpler than assignment, so some students still try to repeat assignment and they don't have time to repeat it. So for this reason, there is no local copy in assignment 3. No local copy of the data in assignment 3. Data is coming from web and it is displayed. I will post assignment right before next lesson and I will discuss it. Essentially, it will be just different data and different images. So like a PET example. In previous iteration of the course, it was fancier. Here is a real data server that was serving weather. It's like real server that is serving weather. And I asked the student, please display the weather. So yeah, of course, it sounds cool, and you can do it. It's not that difficult because it's just processing given JSON. And you already have a code for processing given JSON. So this cannot be done for final exam for sure, because where would I get so much servers? Okay. For this reason, it's not even given server that has some data. It is just JSON file. For pure convenience, because I need to have several copies of the exam that are different, because some students take it at testing center because they were sick or they have accommodations. So I don't want to create several server codes, because creating a file is far more simple than writing a server code. So for pure convenience, it will be just file. And it will be GET request, and just because it is GET request coming to HTTP server will generate to address of the file will generate exactly the same response as it is data server. It will be just JSON returned back. No editing data on the server side. It will be example for math that is storing local data and getting data from this. I also had example, and it's actually existing, where for dice roller, where dice roll data is generated by the server given to the program, and program shows a result of the roll. I think that, of course, it's a practice. You can play with that if you want. But for assignment, it is too simple. For in-class example, if we already have it for math example, why would we have it for dice example? So it doesn't make much of sense to repeat exactly the same thing. So but I will use dice example for different thing. I will use dice example to store preference, to explain how to store user preferences and how to store state permanently. We already know how to store state permanently as tables, database tables, because you have like checkbox list, whatever, or to-do list, or shopping list, with the items stored as a table, and we already had some other examples with items stored as a table in the database. But it is not efficient if we don't have a data that can be imagined as tables, because not every data can be imagined as tables, and if it's not really table structure in any sense, maybe using tables is not a great idea. Of course, we can reduce any data into a set of tables with one row in each, but right? Because any object can be represented as row in a table, and if you have very different objects, you'll have a table per object. Technically, it is possible, but definitely it's not optional. For this reason, Google provides a different way to store objects, not as a table. And there are two ways to deal with it. Simple structure is key-value pairs when values are reasonably simple. And that is called preferences data store. And they call it preferences data store specifically because designed for storing preferences or something simple like that. So this is what we're going to cover today. Our preferences data store. Where we store data, it is still in a file, but Google provides convenient interface to data in a file to access this key-value storage in a file. There is a fancy way also for data store, so it is another variant, fancy way. It's called proto data store. So they create prototype for the data, so it is you can store fancier way, and it provides strict type checking. Data preferences data store does not provide strict data checking. It just has some data checking, but not 100% strict. So it is possible to crash program if you mismatch data. You write integer, but you try to read Boolean out of it. When would it happen? For example, you release different versions of the program, and when user updates, new version storing something as integer now, but previously it was Boolean. Or vice versa. So it's expect different things, so it doesn't work. Or now it is string, but previously it was Boolean. So we need to be careful about this part and just be aware that it may happen. So when you have several releases with updates, so make sure that you don't run into conflicts this way. Also, data store provides extra features to do updates. So from version to version, like, what's this called? I forgot. Yeah, it has API to do updates from previous version to new of the data store. So current recommendation to store data preferences in data store, but it's not always. It wasn't always like that. Previously. Preferences were stored as XML files. And the data store is quite recent addition to Android API. It's probably like 3 years old, not more. So many textbooks, if it's written like 3 years ago, are still doing this older way using XML files. Although it's XML files, it doesn't mean that you have to process XML yourself. Google give you reasonable API to read and write those files. So it wasn't that difficult to use. But Google switched it for different reason. According to them, it was too many issues to fix. Okay? in that approach. The biggest issue that when this approach was created, envisioned, planned, and implemented, it wasn't implemented in mind with the fact that most programs will become multi-threaded. Okay? So it is quite older approach where programs like use its GUI thread or maybe one for thread in background, but not many threads going around running at the same time. So just because there was no specific protection for access for the same data from multiple threads, it has to be done either by user himself or herself who is doing the programming, or not done at all. Okay, so many people just didn't do it because the fact that when we read and write data at the same time from multiple threads, it's a chance once in a blue moon, so it probably will never happen. So people just decided that if it crashes once per user per several years, who cares? But Google decided that let's clean it up. So they changed the API to completely. So it is storing data in files, but not XML files, some other format. And the way how we access it, it is done such way that it is safe for multi-threaded programming. So this is the rationale for moving from XML preferences to data store preferences. Because this way it is safe for multi-threaded programming. Previous it wasn't. So it was a responsibility of programmer to make it safe, and nobody actually cared that much, so they decided, okay, let's enforce it. So this is a rationale for switching to data store from preferences storage. When I mentioned new textbook that came up quite recently, when we started the course, formally release date of the textbook was September, but I looked at the textbooks, it was unreadable because it was online, it was still misformatted, so it was pre-view option. So I decided, I just told you that such book exists, but it's still unreadable. So it's hard to read because text on top of text, on top of images, so mess. But currently it is in readable form. I believe it's linked, a new textbook for Android development. It is this one. In order to access it, you need to log in to their website using Sheridan email. When you type in Sheridan email instead of login, it will give you option to log in through Sheridan website. And this way you can do it for free. Otherwise, it will want you to pay. Okay. So you just choose login and type login name as Sheridan email, and after this it will give you option to log in through Sheridan website. It will be linked to login through Sheridan website. This textbook, although I say new textbook, it's not really new because it is new edition of older textbooks that already had several editions. And it is new in terms of previous edition was using older GUI. It is the first edition that is using Compose through entire textbook. Previous one was just quick introduction to Compose in the end of the book. But this has entire textbook using Compose, so it's more useful. It has 2 chapters. One chapter, it is for explaining older way of dealing with preferences. And it has I believe it is in the same chapter, but it is newer way of dealing with the same preferences. So it has both. In this course, I'm skipping older one. In case, I assume that if you really need it because you perhaps have to edit existing code, and you don't want to convert everything to new way, you will learn it if you need it. So I don't spend time on older one, and this textbook has explanation for it. And also explanation how to deal with older one is all around because it stayed like a decade. So It's probably more than a decade. So there is lots of information how to do older one. For newer one, it's slightly trickier to find information. There is discussion here, and also discussion inside of the course I'm referring to. The course I'm referring to, it is a course from Google, and that doesn't have older preferences, it has only new one explanation. So where is that? It is developerandroid.com courses, you know where it is. And I made sure that I'm covering everything from that course. Even the examples I explained as the examples, I don't convert the examples into my way of doing it, or a little more advanced way of doing it, because first of all, it's more work. Okay. And the second reason why I don't want to do it, because if everything is given in perfect way, you will expect it, but it's not real life. Okay? Because you have to learn from code that is written at different times, hopefully not 10 years ago, but plus minus 3 years. Right? So for this sense, I stop at editing their code. I just, as long as it is working, I'm explaining as it is. But I'm creating examples or rewriting my own examples such a way that they create impression that it was done yesterday. So latest libraries, the way how new Android Studio generate projects. So in this case, I try to find the best, like combining latest and greatest, hopefully, maybe not greatest, but latest, and experience with slightly older code, not 10 years old, but 2-3 years old. That comes with most of Google examples, because some of them are brand new, some of them are just as we have to deal with it. So today's example is from Google. And I also started convert example for dice game, because dice game was explained in the beginning of this course, and it didn't have data dependency injection, it didn't have repositories, so structure was as simple as possible. But if we add things to this project, we need to care about organizing it in a reasonable way. For example, if we want to store user selection of number of dice, for example, you select 3 dice and you roll it. After this, you select 2 and roll. So it remembers your latest settings for number of dice as your preference, essentially. Last thing that you choose, it is stored as a preference. So since it is stored somewhere, and it is filed later under the hood, so you need to have some reasonable interface to read and write this file. So it is logically done through repository. So now we'll have to deal with the repository layer. And you probably noticed that I switched to using hill dependency injection quite earlier, because it takes time to get used to it. For this reason, I'm switching dice game from elementary code to dependency injection with Hilt. Today, I will show how it is done with Hilt. It doesn't have storage for preference yet. Example from Google does. I have a previous code that has it. I will just copy paste. But today I will explain just with Hilt. Also, I will make it requirement for assignment 3. So assignment 3, it will be harsh requirement, like explicitly said. Use dependency injection with Hilt. And the reason for it, use dependency injection with Hilt in assignment 3, the reason for it is that assignment 4 is based on an example from Google that is using Hilt. I already told you that many examples from Google don't use it, but that one does. Okay? In order to have reasonable transition, let's do it in step. And so for assignment 3, it will be explicit requirement using Hilt. And I assume that for final exam you will also use it because it's like assignment 3, because it's, okay? So for this, for assignment 3, it will be explicitly said you have to use it. I was thinking why some students don't use it, and it's perhaps they just try to use whatever is in Google course, which makes sense, why not? But at some point, when we move to larger projects, we have to go with recommendations of Google for larger projects. And for larger projects, Google explicitly recommends HILT. So this is my rationale. And since it is the last course in Kotlin programming for Android, and HILT, it is Kotlin technology, it's not just, you cannot have it in JavaScript, for example, or TypeScript. So it is the last time when it is discussed in the course. So we have to talk about it. So this is my rationale. What other teacher who is teaching Android course for diploma program said me that he's not using HILT in his course for the simple reason that it is diploma program, it's extra step in complexity, so he decided not to do it. And he said that also as his rationale said, code generators don't use it. Okay, but it's probably bad reason, bad explanation why you shouldn't use it, because code generators don't use it. But it's a fact that code generators most of the time don't use HILT. It is bad reason, of course, for not using HILT, because we need to learn how to program without code generators, right? So it is just a funny observation that perhaps just code generators are not as smart as we want them to be. This is why they just find more brute force approach than fancier one. Okay, so going back to the topic. So this will be explained. This will be explained using dependency injection using HILT. Currently, it just has HILT without preferences. So it was topic for next lesson. And going with this and this. What is this link? APP architecture data store. This is theoretical web page specifically about using data store in two variants. One variant, it is for preferences, and one it's more general for any kind of objects. And that is more general, it is also requires more learning curve. This part, it is directly to the topic with one preference stored. This is from the course I'm referring to. So when we go here, we will see a discussion. So you see it is Android basics with Compose, right? We will see this video discussion of this energetic lady. She's very kind of excited about the topic. And she is introducing data store. And please watch it when you have time, like tonight, or it's not very long, so probably like 10 minutes or so. And she's discussing that a data store is a new way to store preferences, and it is better way because older way was kind of, when it was planned, it wasn't a multi-threaded programming, wasn't first priority because it didn't happen a lot. So they decided to switch to data store storage for this reason. And also data store is more general. It's not just for preferences. We can store other things. So what is rationale? If something can be imagined as tables, it should be stored as tables. If it's not, maybe table is not a good idea. Database table is not a good idea. So this is essentially approach. And interface to data store, it is somewhat similar to Room, but Room it is table-based, so it doesn't have table table part, but it gives you flow to access the data. So it gives you option to write the data, and it gives you flow to access the data. So when new data is in data store, some part of your program is writing it, other parts are notified through flow. Or data collected from the flow, it goes to right place. So this is the idea. There is some call to write the data and some call to get a flow. So when data is written from one part of the program, other parts of the program get the data from the flow. So this is the approach. And there are two variants, one for fancier data and one for key value storage. Today we will cover simpler, it is preferences, it is for key value storage. And for fancier data, it is proto data store. So preferences data store and proto data store. So this is the main idea of this video. I'll watch it later, have fun. Google has special talent to pick people who can present information fun way. And so this is what in inspiring way. And most of these videos are kind of, you watch it and you feel better. Okay. There is one more video. It is this one. And this video seems to be out of place. It dives into more details about preferences data store. When she is discussing preferences data store in this video, she assumes that you already have lots of previous programming experience with older way of dealing with it, which is not the case in introductory course. So most likely it was recorded for different reason, but not for this course. And they just reused this video. So when you watch this video, just watch it, but don't be alarmed that by the fact that she scrolls tons of code that looks crazy. Okay, look crazy because it's so much information at one time. Okay, not crazy because it's stupid, but crazy kind of too much at once. Okay, she talks about example which is not example right here. Okay, this is why I say that perhaps this is video out of place. She continues talking about data store and compares to older way, and talks about, and she tries to explain example, but it's not this example, not even close, totally different one. Okay, so when you watch this video, if you watch this video, don't be alarmed that she's showing some codes which is not straightforward, and tries to explain it on the fly quickly, because it's possibly not targeted to the audience of this course. It is just overview kind of thing. Where did I get information? I got information from this, not from that. I got information from here, save preference locally using data store. And this is example from Google for today, at least for half of the course, this means. That is storing preference only one. It's user preference by this button. Either show as a list or grid. Okay. And so it is only one preference, and it is only Boolean variable. Is list, if it's true, show as a list. Otherwise, it's grid or something like that. Okay. So it's only one preference, Boolean variable. And this is a lot simpler example than her video example. This is not explained on video, but it is explained in text, and we will go through the final code. Most of these Google Labs, they're not specific for lots of creativity. They just explain concept, and they ask you, OK, now copy-paste stuff. OK, what's the point? So, OK, you will learn how to copy-paste. So for this reason, I'm saving time by going already with copy-pasted stuff into it. But it definitely contains nice introduction into this example. This data is just an array of objects. It's not inside of any repository, nothing. It is hard-coded as an array of objects, which is probably a good idea because they reduce the complexity of the project to only one repository that's storing this piece. So they do have repository, but repository for preference, not repository for the data that we see. In real-life example, you'll probably have two repositories. A repository for the data and repository for preferences. They don't have it here. Okay. So today I'm explaining this, and I'm doing transition to with dependency injection for preferences for tomorrow. I have planned to explain proto data store. It is fancier thing for fancier data. In my opinion, it makes sense, but if it looks overwhelming, I will just skip it. So I will see depending on how it looks actually. Okay. So there are two data stores: preferences data store, key value storage for simple data, and a proto data store for essentially any data. But it's not as a table. It is, you have to, like, kind of proto, it's prototype. It's short for prototype. You create prototype for the data that you're going to store, and it's using this prototype to access it. So I plan to make up some short example or find some short example, but it's not guaranteed. So for next lesson, if it happens, it will be next lesson. For next lesson, we'll also discuss assignment, but assignment is already discussed, and it will be just posted and just what it's about. Right? So they start with download starter code, set up dependencies, and the dependencies, as you see, it is in older format, but it's still useful because at least it gives you library name, and we can search it, search the library from project structure dialog. Another option is just to see by analogy library names in a TOM.ml file and split it into three pieces. Okay, this is version, this is what is module, it is entire piece, but this piece can be split in two. There are two, like group and something else, lib. When you open TOM.ml file, it's obvious how to split it. So the information, although it is out of date, it's not a waste. We can apply it by analogy since we already know how TOM.ml file looks like. And it is exactly the same information, but it is in one line, but it is split into three pieces or two, depending on your preference. You can split it in two, like this entire piece and this one, or up to column, it's one piece. This is second, this is third. Right? So this code, as you see, it is using a repository. So they create repository with where constructor needs parameter, right? So in repository itself is given to view model. So they have a view model referring to repository, and repository also need parameter data store. Repository constructor need a parameter data store. So they need to connect pieces, right? So in order to create view model, they need to have a factory for view model factory. Since they are not using HILT, it's a little bit extra code to create a factory for view model. And they decided to store this factory in view model companion object. It is like in the previous example for Mars pictures. I said it's only one example. No, it's actually two. I forgot about this one. Similarly to Mars example, they store factory for a view model as companion object of view model class. And if you remember inventory database, they didn't use this approach. They created singleton class, just global object essentially, and they created factories for repositories in that class. So it was different approaches. Why do they do it? Yeah, perhaps to show that both ways are possible. Maybe this is the reason. And also, their way to deal with dependency injection in this example is somewhat different from Mars example. Because in Mars example, we had a container object linked to application, right? Because application has reference to container objects, so on create of application objects, it's calling container, creating container, and assigning to latent init variable. In this example, they decided to use more brute force approach. They don't create container object. They just refer to repository directly inside of application class. Perhaps they decided that, okay, it's only one variable, why we should create class to store just one variable. So they initialized this variable directly inside of application class. So it is more brute force approach. Okay. So this is a class user repository that expect data store. A data store is initialized is inside of onCreate of application. And there is a trick. You will see in the code, which is kind of not immediately obvious. I didn't see it anywhere except this code, so we will see it. It's also deserves attention. And one thing why I'm delaying Hilt example for data store, because I want to make sure that it's the best way, actually. No, using Hilt is the best way, but that code looks a little kind of overcomplicated to me, so I would need to think about it. Maybe it's just not the shortest way of doing it. Okay, so it is why I'm delaying it. Next, they discuss. Okay, so there is an interface to edit it, and edit. It is definitely member function of data. Member function is like method of it, and second parameter it is lambda function where you write how to edit it. For example, here it is preferences. It gives you parameter preferences, and this is key assign value. So it is brute force. Right? In order to assign value, it is a data store object, edit, and what we about to edit is given as a parameter of lambda function. We use key as square bracket. It's similar to map access, right? It's not necessarily integer. It's a string, actually. Key linear layout. This is string. Use it as a key to retrieve the Boolean. So they created function, Boolean parameter, and this is how it is given to data store. But this is wrapped as a method of the repository. So repository is writing this Boolean variable into data store this way. So there is definitely an analogy of creating repository, but access, it's not like accessing tables, so we don't have to deal with that. And when we retrieve data from data store, it is given to us as a flow. So data store data, it is the flow of parameters stored in the given data store. Since data store can contain more than one parameters, it gives you flow of everything. And if you need, in order to get flow of specific one, you have to do flow transformation. Similarly, how we would do flow transformation on data in the flow coming from the database. So data store dot data, it is a flow of everything. it's not flow of Boolean. Because this is not end of the line, it continues further. So in the next line, they have a transformation of this data. So they have to pick data using key from, they need to pick Boolean from the key, using the key from this key value storage. You see, they have a map to do the data transformation. Since it's a flow similar to flow coming from the database, because it's a flow, right? It's the same kind of object. We can use a map to do transformation of the data inside of the flow. And what is first parameter of the map? It is what is inside of the flow. In this case, it is flow of preferences. And now they do transformation from flow of all preferences to a flow of Booleans. So they pick specific one. So they pick preferences based on this value. But what if this value is not in the database, is not in the data storage yet? Because it's not written. It could happen, right? Because before you access it, it should be written. But what if it's not written? You don't want to crash your program, right? So this is what they do. If this gives you null, because it's not written yet, they use Elvis operator, how it works. If what is on the left is null, use what is on the right. So if preferences based on the key give us null, it's just using true in the data transformation. So to avoid any kind of crash. So true is default in this case. I use similar approach for storing number of dice, and instead of true, it was number of dice. Of course, it's an integer, so I use it 3. The same approach. So my code, in terms of storing data, it is just careful copy-pasting and converting Boolean to integer, essentially. So it's not very different in this case. Right? So this shows is any allowed companion object? What is about 1 second? Since flow, flow is from the file, and when we initialize flow, we provide name of the file to store data. What can happen is read-write exception of the file. Probably read file doesn't exist or was deleted. I don't know. Read-write exception. And this exception will be inserted into the flow. So they show how to deal with exceptions inside of the flow. So far, we didn't have it in the first time about exceptions that happen inside of the flow. So it is catch block, but it's not around any piece of code. It is catch method of the flow itself. So .catch is the method to catch exceptions in the flow. And it happens before map. Because if exception happens, you don't have the data to do mapping. So mapping will cause a crash. So this is done before mapping. All right? So it's a smart way, and definitely we didn't see it before, right? Because the flow that we had, it is flow from the database, and it didn't happen to us, exceptions from the database. So, and this is the code how to deal with it. It is default parameter of the lambda function. So essentially, it is exception. Right? So in this catch, it is just expanded code from this one. They're dealing with exception. And if exception, if it is IO exception, log E. Remember that in my example for different screen sizes, I use it log D. D stands for debug. E stands for error. It will just show message in red at the window at the bottom, log hat. and I use it tag for filtering. So this tag, it is just constant. They define it here. See? So we can filter messages for specific tag. So logcat window will not contain other things that we don't want to see. Right? Log E makes it in red. And this will be a message. And what do they have? After handling it, it is just logging. They didn't cause crash. They emit empty preferences. So if it is I/O exception, they insert empty preferences object into the flow. So if nothing happens because of the error, they decided, okay, let's record the error in the log, but let's do not let it crash. Let's insert empty preferences. And if empty preferences is inserted, emit means inserted in the flow. If empty preference is inserted, we'll get it empty. It will be nothing, and result true default one. So this is how they avoid possible crash if file doesn't exist or something like that. They code I/O exception and emit empty preferences, and it is handled as inserting default value into the flow. But what if it is not I/O? They decided, okay, if it's not I/O, let's crash it. So this throw exception. So if they decided to catch I/O exceptions for any other things, they rethrow exception, so it will cause crash, unless you catch it somewhere around the code. So it's also extra piece of information to learn. It's definitely a good idea and nice learning experience from it. How to deal with flows. And initializing data store, they decided to do it in application class. And this is an interesting trick. In order to initialize data store, similarly to initializing database, we need to have access to context. What is context? Context is an object that describes your app. But it's also, it describes your app. It's also base class for other global objects in your program, for example, for activities. So in activity, we can also refer to information inside of the context because it's a base class of activity. It is one of the parents. It is parent class of activity, context, somewhere down, okay, grandparent, okay, of activity. It's also grandparent of application class. But unlike activity, application class exists through entire program, but activities are created and recreated when we rotate the screen. So context inside of activity is not reliable long term because activities are created and discarded. So for these reasons, when we initialize part of the program that is reading file, like it is database file, because room database is storing data in a file. It's not a server. It is just fancy access to a file through SQL. Similarly to database and similar to what we have here, we need a context, but context global one. So it is, we use context in this case from application class. So it's also parent of application class. And application, it's an object that lives throughout the application lifetime. So it's a global one. So what do they have here to initialize preferences data store? They have a trick. They created, this part is not inside of application. I don't know why, perhaps they decided, okay, why not? Okay. So this is outside of application. So they created extended, not a function, but extended property. Remember these extension functions, right? You create a function outside of the class that behaves like it belongs there. So they create extension property to context. So this property becomes available in the context. So when we refer to this property inside of objects that inherit from context, we can access it. I don't know why they decided to do it, perhaps to show it's possible. There's no other obvious reason why. So they created extension property to context. It's not very different from function, because property, it is pair of functions, setter and getter, right? It is a property, essentially, it's a setter and getter to something. So technically, it is two extension functions together. So this is why it's possible. So they created extension property to context, and this is why this value becomes available inside of application object. Kind of interesting trick, and perhaps like deserve our attention, right? So what is next? This is a class, but you see this is extension of context, it's outside the class. So now they can access this property created outside of application class inside of application class, because application inherits from context. So when we create application, they decided, okay, instead of creating container like before, because previously container had many things in it, and now they need to store only one repository, they decided not to create container because it's one variable. So previously, like in Mars example, we had a parameter late init referring to container that contains repository in something else. In this case, it's only one repository. They decided not to deal with container. So they just create reference in the repository inside of application, to repository inside of the application class. And this will be initialized here. They just don't have a code yet. It will be here. You see user preference repository, and this is where they get data stored. It's not declared here. It is declared outside as extension of context. Since application is inheriting from context, it becomes available inside of application. Why? Okay, they decided so. All right. So this is how they initialize repository, and repository now it is just property of application. Remember how we access it application. Why we need application, right? Because application is a global object, we need to pick data, store it globally, essentially, right? And we need to do it inside of factory for view model. So next thing, they create view model factory and access application class and pick repository from application class, because view model factory need access to repository, right? Because why? Because constructor of view model requires repository. So in order to call constructor of view model, we need repository. So in the factory of view model, we need to first access application, then pick repository and give it to constructor of view model. So next thing is dealing with factory. But in order to first, since they created customized application class, all customized application classes must be mentioned in manifest file. Otherwise, it's crashing. It doesn't matter if you use Hilt or you don't use Hilt. If you create extension of application class, you need to mention it inside of manifest file, otherwise it will crash when you start your program. So this is what they told. And they created factory as companion object inside of view model. So this piece, you see companion object for the factory accessing application. See this application. And next thing will be call of a constructor used repository for this. So this piece of the code is inside of here. So this is what they have. They accessed application, typecasted to particular class, we have it, and after this they pick factory and call view model. You see, constructor of view model, application, and this is parameter of application. So this is the logic of accessing data. The rest is GUI. The rest is GUI. This is how they write it, and this is how to read it. Right. So this is function select layout. This is part of your model. When you click on it, it's doing update. Select layout. So it's probably current state. And since it is done like writing of the file, so it is suspend function, save layout preference is suspend function. It has to be done in coroutine context, similar to database. So they launch task in view model scope to do it in background. Save user preferences. So this is part of view model. Select layout. So it will react on clicking of this icon in the corner. Current state changing to whatever. And what is left? This is how to pick it. We already saw this code. This is just a repetition of it. It was before. Since it's a flow, and flow itself does not trigger any kind of updates, we need to have a stateful to pick data in some container. In order to create state flow from the flow, we use state in method of a flow. So this approach is exactly the same as approach of picking data from the database. We get flow from the database, and we convert it to state flow using state in. Right? So the same for scope, view model scope, started and starting while subscribe at 5 seconds. It is in milliseconds, so 5,000, it is 5 seconds. It means it will update content of the attached container, state container, for 5 seconds from the flow, even if data is not collected, so to have the current data. It will give fresh data during rotation of the screen, because during rotation of the screen, nothing is collecting data, but it will keep it updated. So this is rationale. And initial state, it is whatever given initial by calling constructor. It is requirement of creating state flow. It must be initialized with some value. It is whatever is given to this state. State is there is object here, storing state of the screen. It is whatever is given there. It is here. Okay, and last one, get solution code. So they assume that you, based on this information, you did careful copy pasting into started code based on the given logic. So we don't copy paste it here, provided explanation. So let's look at what is finished one after break, okay? And before the break, we discussed theory about data store in deep details of the given example. Definitely it's not all possible details, because more information can be found here. In week 8, there is a link on IPP architecture data store. This is a theoretical article. but it doesn't cover stuff from what was discussed. It's more API of data store itself. It's not about integration into the program. And it's also covering some information about proto data store. Before we dive to the code, let me show two more things. After they finish discussing, first they talk about libraries to include. Again, it's older format, but it gives information what to include. So we have to apply logic of the string to the logic of TOMML file to split the string into 3 pieces. Also, later it talks about was preference data store and proto data store. It's different libraries. They talk like preference data store key value pairs. And proto data store is more complicated. They discuss ideas what we already know. Now they talk about proto data store defining schema. So we need to describe data as a schema in a proto data store. If I make an example, or like shorter one, because the example is long, I don't want to use it. And we will talk about this at the next lesson. So they discuss more stuff, but in the end, they have 2 links. This one, code labs. One code lab for preferences data store and one code lab for proto data store. Remember that a video, what I mentioned, she talks about long code that assumes some previous coding experience. And I said, yeah, okay, it looks kind of real nuts at once because it's too much of the stuff. It is this lab. Okay? So that code is from this lab, and this lab starts from discussing of it, and no, it starts with, it is this app. Okay? With filtering of the data, when she's choosing different filters, it shows different data. Obviously, this is more code than just one button for preferences. So her code on the screen is coming from this lab, and it's definitely a lot more code. In second lab, it is the same data, but stored as not as preferences data store, but as proto data store. The same program. So we're kind of comparing two. In my opinion, it's a little too much for introduction. This is why they had a small example for introductory course. But examples for this exist, they're just bigger code. Okay. For both, actually. For preferences and for proto data store. So this is a nice thing to know where to find information in case you really need it. Otherwise, just, okay, whatever. Okay. So, now next step is to go to code and see everything together. So it is last step of get solution code. As before, let's clone it just this address using Android Studio. So I do Command C. Then I open Android Studio. It did work. I tried it yesterday. It does work. Next, oops. I go to clone repository as before. I browse for folder for this section. What is this? Okay. Project, this section. Open. Command V. And I need, since I browse it for the folder, I need to copy this again without .git to create a folder for it. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. You can type whatever, but I prefer to use the same name so I can find it later. Okay. And clone a Trust project. Yesterday it was working, so today hopefully it will work as well. It will ask to update Android Gradle plugin. It is version referred, Android Gradle plugin, version referred in build files. Don't do that. There are two reasons. One, it is quite slow. We will have to wait and wait and wait. Especially if code is long, it is quite slow. For shorter code, it's quicker. Because it tries to scan the code and find differences and so on. And second reason, code may stop working. It will not break the code, but we'll have to go through code and libraries to figure out what is different now. Because API is changing, build system is changing, libraries used to contain one thing, now they contain slightly different thing. And what happens is that sometimes they split library in more libraries. They include library that was before, and now it is not one library, it's 3 libraries. Okay? So with newer version, it contains less functions in it, because now you have to include 3 libraries instead of 1. This happened to icons. So when we use older code that is referring to icon libraries, we have to not just to change version of the library, we also have to include icon libraries. So it does happen to other libraries as well. Okay. So it definitely needs to be addressed. And this is why I'm updating my own code such way that it is using with latest libraries, latest libraries available, like it was created yesterday. But I'm not playing with Google code anymore as long as it is working. It is for experience of just using older code. If you feel like updating libraries, go for it, but I don't want to. It's too much of doing each time. Okay? So I'm not clicking on this one. So let's run it to see what it does. And after this, see the portions of the code that we already saw in it, or everything together. All right? So here it is. So I'm not sure what is default one, because I already clicked on this button before on the same device. So for you, it could start from, not from grid, but from list. I don't really know, because I forgot how it started. It is definitely storing preferences before application runs. And since the name of the file is the same, it remembers what I ran it before. Okay. Since our folder for the app is exactly the same, file for the preferences is still in the same folder. And this is why it's extremely important when you do assignment, package name should be unique. This is why I ask you to use your login name as a part of package name, so I will never run into a situation that app of one student is accessing some whatever settings or whatever database of app of another student. And of course crashing because it's not compatible. Yeah. Right. How to avoid this is to uninstall it. For example, you change something about settings not compatible way. You can always uninstall your app from the device, and when you do uninstall your app from the device, by just dragging and dropping into trash can, the same way how you do it on Android, you click on icon and drag it into trash can. It will also remove all databases and all settings files. Okay. How to do it? You just go to apps, find where it is, have pet data, mass trainer, safety, photos. I'm looking for it. Where's that? Third row. Oh yeah, they customized icon. Yeah. Okay. So let's drag it and trash can. You see uninstall. Okay. So now it will be like true default, not whatever it's reading. Okay. So let's start it. The same way you deal with databases. If you change it in some, oh, you see it's a different one. Okay. So default is a column, right? Okay. Default is list, not a grid. And when we click on this button, you see it is changed to the grid. It's also changing button to after we click. So let's see how they implemented it. They have a state for the screen, and it is in Kotlin UI, view model, and I believe it's Google tend to create state in the same file as view model, perhaps to keep things, related things together. In my code, I have it in separate file. So they have view model class. A view model class contains companion object that contains factory. So in this program, similarly to Mars photos, they put a factory inside of companion object of view model. In database examples, they have factory in separate file. They created a singleton or a global object, and they put factory there. And state is here as data class. In my code, it is a separate file. Doesn't matter. Just okay. So what is the state? Is linear layout? Default is true. So it starts with the column by default. Toggle description. It's also part of the state, and it is referring to ID of the string that is describing it. I don't know, not sure where is description on the screen. We can look it up. But it is calculated value based on the Boolean. You see, it is assignment, if, and it is calculated value. Right? Is linear layout? If it is true, it is using string from the resource that contains grid layout. So this is what Android Studio is doing for string resources. It is inserting on the screen content of the string resource, but it's actually in the code, it's ID. If you click on it, it is ID. ID, it's integer. R is generated class. Or a linear layout. They do the same for icon. So they refer to ID of an icon R, drawable, and name of the file inside of the drawable. So they use it here. So for the state, they decided to store not just true false and use this logic inside of this GUI. This is what I would typically do. I will just store true false. But they decided, OK, let's do logic right away, right here. Yeah, why not? So it works, why not? In my code, I will just put if inside of GUI itself, not a state. Again, that's just how people code, just a decision. Right? So this is state. State is stored in the flow. So they have UI state, you see state flow. So it's not in flow, it is stored in state flow. Right here. It means they need to do flow transformation. So they pick user preference repository, here it is, given as a parameter to view model, a constructor of view model. Is linear layout give us flow of booleans? We don't know, it is in the code. Well, what we already saw. That is linear layout is the flow of booleans, because they did data transformation of flow of preferences into flow of booleans. So is linear layout is flow of booleans, but they want to create flow of states. So they do additional transformation map, the transformation of the flow using map. So this is Boolean, but now it is Boolean inside of state. So they call constructor of that state object below. That constructor needs one parameter, which is that Boolean. And it will calculate two other values. One for the message and one for the icon. Like message ID integer and icon ID integer. Now it is a flow, and they pick it in state. They need to create a container attach it to the flow to make state flow. So state in, it's a method of a flow to create state flow. This is what we already discussed. Scope to create scope of the process to retrieve data and inserting this into, not process, task of retrieving data and inserting this into state container. It is view model scope because it's running in the view model, and it should continue into while view model exists for 5 seconds. Right after this, it will stop. And this is 5 seconds. If nothing is collecting the data, it will stop after 5 seconds. But it will continue for 5 seconds. It is optimization for rotation of the screen. So data is fresh while GUI that collects the data is not around. This is 5 seconds. And initial value, they initialize it by calling constructor of that piece. Okay. Constructor of state. The real question is, why is it created this inside of run blocking piece? Run blocking means wait till it's finished, right? Run blocking. And perhaps when this piece is created, it is done in the background. So run blocking is finishing the task, actually, waiting till task is finished. Okay. My understanding is that they didn't just assign value directly from that we give it here as true. For example, by default, linear is true. If we just give true as it is, there is no need to do any run blocking because it's you call constructor of just of an object. You give it true and it's available. Yeah, it's value. But what they do, they pick it from the flow. Because user preferences repository is linear, it is a flow. And first, it is suspend function. You cannot call suspend function created from the flow. You cannot call suspend function outside of coroutine context because it won't compile, essentially. So first, it is suspend function that is picking data from the flow. And you can have to call it in some coroutine context. So they decided to use it as run blocking to initialize first state. I think it's a little overcomplicated. I will just give true in my code. Okay, I will just call the constructor with true. Okay, and this will be fine with me. Their approach is slightly better because if I initialize true here and initialize, remember that when we create repository, we also give default value. You saw it in the code. If it's not there, use true, right? It's a little uncomfortable about it. Why? Because you have that true in the repository has to be consistent with true given here. Because it's default value, right? And if we change it in one piece of the code, in order to stay consistent, we have to change it in another piece of the code. So it is potential issue of a bug, right? So for potential bug issue later, if we change it in one place, but didn't change it in another place. common way to deal with it is just to declare a constant. We don't really need to do this fancy thing. Why did they do this fancy thing? My understanding just they wanted to show that it's possible, so why not? Okay. Now, the way how I address it, the way how I would address it, I would just give true here and true there. But it's definitely asking for possible bugs later, because in one place could be edited to false, but we forget to edit it in another place. The way to deal with it standard way is just to declare constant. So it is not referring to kind of default arrangement, right? And it will be true or false, so it will return default arrangement, whatever. So we change it in one place, so it's constant value. This is how we do it, but this is definitely fancy. But they did have to call run blocking because it is creating coroutine context to call suspend function. Otherwise, it wouldn't even compile. So this is the reason why they do run blocking. Formally, it wouldn't compile because this is suspend function. Am I right? Yes, you see, suspend function. All right. So this is how they pick it, is like how they create state out of it. Select layout is call it on the click of the button. And it is update of some data, so it takes time to do it. So it is done through suspend function. So this is also suspend function, and this is why it is called in view model launch. A view model launch and call of the suspend function to update this data store. This is a factory, and the way how it is done, we already discussed it, is copy-paste what we saw. Right? First, they get application, typecast it to our actual application, right? Class, from parent class to child class, and after this, they can access repository stored in an application class as a parameter. And given it is given to constructor of view model as a parameter. We have to use factory because this is not using dependency injection with Hilt. Hilt is creating factories automatically. So let's see the rest of the code. This is application class, as we already saw in this area. They decided to store data store object in the context. And again, why? Yeah, perhaps this is the reason that why not. Okay. And when they refer to data store inside of application, this is available because its context is parent class of application. So they initialize user preference repository inside of onCreate of application. So repository is initialized when application object is created. And you already saw how it is picked inside of the factory. Our UI is just one page, right? So it's not complicated. A view model we already saw. In main activity, it is referring to app. In my code, I call it root screen, right? Because it's kind of a root of the tree of the screen, document tree of the screen, or whatever. Right? They use app, and it's creating a little bit ambiguity in terms of, you see, desert release app and also desert release application. And you know this is totally different content and for totally different purposes. This is GUI arrangement, but this is logic for dependency injection. The same naming issue is in other parts of code for the course, right, from Google. So what is inside of this app desert release up. Only call for desert release screen, right? And view model is picked as default parameter. See, a desert release up is called without parameters, but they provide a view model as default parameter here. And when they call view model function, they have to provide factory to it because it's not a hill dependency injection. So a view model is actual view model function outside of the hill. That needs to know factory, where to find factory. Because factory is not created by Hilt. This is why Hilt knows where is the factory, because it's creating it. But if you create a factory yourself, it needs to know where to store it, which object handles it. So it is logical issue. It cannot anticipate where you put it. So you have to give it to it. Right? So and this is function. I'll call it inside, and issue is preview. When we have some view model given as a parameter created by view model factory, preview is not necessary. Preview may or may not understand it, depending how complicated it is. When it is Hilt view model, it won't. With this one, it's kind of playing with depending on complexity. So this function is existing for sake of previewing. So they're previewing not entire piece, they preview only this piece, which is the same stuff but without view model given to it. So can we propagate view model down? Technically we can, but it's not recommended by Google because it is efficiency of the update of the screen. They tell you can propagate it once, but do not keep it pushing it as a parameter further and further because it makes it less and less efficient. Google recommends it once, and after this it's less efficient, don't do it. So they have view model at the top level, but not down. And preview, this is for sake of creating previews. So they have a scaffold for the screen, toolbar. This scaffold top bar, it's top app bar. With the parameter icon. It is in actions. Actions are here. It could be more than one. Okay. And they have icon button to click and select layout. It is given, right? Change to opposite. State layout is coming from UI state. Remember that state contains booleans for it. So they pick the boolean and change it to opposite and calls set layout back to view model because this is coming from view model. This lambda function is coming from view model. You see, a view model contains a regular function and double column converts regular function type to lambda function type. So it's double column, it is type conversion. Okay. So this is given as action to top app bar. This is just color settings of it. And what is this icon? It is part of the same. Okay. And icon is picked from UI state. You saw this logic. It is based on true false. They prefer it not to put if here. I would put if here. But they decided, OK, let's put it into UI state. Icon. And also content description also coming from that. For inner portion, it is below that piece. They have if switch based on is linear layout, and they have two different layouts. Setup for linear and setup for grid. So they created two functions for linear and for grid. And in one, they'll most likely use lazy column, in the other lazy grid. So let's see. For the linear layout, they use a lazy column. Yeah. The same iteration for items, piece which is iteratable items. A key it is for optimization. It's not required, but it's a good idea to have. So they use the key. Key is its name of a dessert. And card to display this piece. In the card, they have a text with background, right, and shape for the card. And for grid, they have lazy grid, decided to fix 3. Remember that Mars column makes decisions based on weights. In this case, it is fixed to 3, similarly to my code for mass examples. I just fixed it to 2. Okay. So it is fixed to 3, padding it is around it, and since it's grid, we have 2, vertical arrangement and horizontal arrangement. If we deal with columns or lazy column or lazy row, it will be one of them. And again, iteratable piece through items, key, and this is similar piece, except it is different shape. Okay, questions? So it is relatively straightforward, right? Compared to another example that I'm not covering at this moment, always more stuff on the screen. Now we have lots of time left, so let's quickly look at partially converted code for dice roller. Okay. Our previous example with dice roller didn't have repository, didn't have dependency injection. I added a repository for data generation, and I added dependency injection with Hilt because later it will be repository for settings. Why? To show how to deal with it with using Hilt, because this is not using Hilt. Right? So I will stop it, and let's clone that code. I changed it a lot, so let's clone it. Reclone it. So it is dice game. Code, copy, Android Studio, clone repository, Command V, scraping folder, right, and clone. Main branch is not using Hilt. It has only one minor change. I renamed stuff on it. So let's see at that part. And I also had changed versions of the libraries. So let's see that change. Okay, this is done yesterday, updated libs, right? Lib versions tom.ml. Okay, this is what I mentioned. When I changed versions for the libraries, compose libraries, I had to add icon library after that, because it was split out of another library. It stopped compiling of it. So it happens in Android. You see, I added icons libraries here, because previously it is the same code referring to the same icons, but now it is not included into compose library, it is separate library. So I had to copy paste this one from in new projects that are using icons created. Okay. The rest is the same, and at some points API changed, so I changed just function calls. So I'm calling different function from new API. Next, let's switch to Hilt version. So that was a minor change due to libraries. I had to include icons. Using Hilt, check out. After doing so, I need to synchronize because now it is using different libraries, so most likely it will fail if I do not synchronize it. I remember I had this service that was providing results of the roles. I call it this service. I renamed this to repository. And the reason is that previous examples I used it written years ago, they used the keyword service for something that provides functionality. But it does give extra confusion, point of confusion, because there is also service in Android API. Because service in Android API, it is some unit of the program running in the background separate from UI. So we can have activity that provides UI. We can also have a service running in the background without activity. So it has nothing to do with role or services here because it's just a class that gives you random object. I'm referring to the code that we will use in the end of the course as a demonstration for Firebase, for cloud. Right? In the previous version of the code, our author of the code named many things, call it services. And it seems like, why not? It is just providing some functionality, so it's serving some functionality. But in the next iteration of the code, like coming out, that came out in the beginning of this year, she renamed all those services into repositories. Somebody told her it's not a good idea, so she decided herself to rename it. So I'm following the same trend. So I renamed this service into repository. Right, so in my dice game, in the domain I still have raw data, but in the data I have raw data repository. It is the same thing. It requires random object. And I renamed this. Instead of get raw data, I said get random raw data. So because I will have also option to store raw data. And I need to be clear that this is coming random one, not the stored one. So this is renamed. And since I'm using dependency injection, I need to tell the system how to create this object, because it will be injected elsewhere. So one way to create this object is to use inject in front of constructor. The other one is to create a module which provides some function with the return value of this object, called constructor. This seems to be shorter. There is also intermediate way. If you create interface, you have to write inject in front of constructor and create a module with binds, where you bind interface to the object implementing the interface. I didn't create interface here, so I don't need, and I don't even have an option to do bind because it's not interface. So this is creating the object for it. So let's do, so this is renaming and piece for creating. Definitely it is using Hilt. So I had to include libraries using Hilt. So in TomML, all these Hilt libraries have the same version number except the one that is view model compose. So I decided to declare one variable instead of several. All these Hilt libraries are here, and this is with compose. I don't have a library related to navigation. Hilt navigation compose, something like that, because this can still have one page. Doesn't have navigation. Since we're using Hilt, I have to use KSP plugin, right? Because the other option, is older, because there are 2 options to do it, and KSP is new one. And this is a trick. Here it is, KSP. I play it with fire. Kotlin version is not 100% the same as KSP version. This may fail, but it didn't. Okay, so it is better to use exactly the same Kotlin version as first part of KSP. Okay, why I cannot use 2.2.21? It doesn't exist yet. This is why I couldn't. How do you know? I went to a website that refers to repository serving data to Android Studio and all other things using these libraries. And I look up tab. 2.2.21 still doesn't exist. So if it doesn't work, you just change everything to the same, 2.2.20. So it will be just a little bit older, but it is guaranteed to work. But this is not guaranteed to work, but it just happened to work. Okay. All right? So it is a little bit playing with fire. When we use HILT with KSP, we need to include KSP here and HILT here. Also, these 2 things, besides these HILT pieces, go to Gradle builds, right? Global one, you see part for KSP and part for HILT. And local for the module, for KSP and HILT. And also in the libraries itself, we see KSP is using compiler of HILT here. We have a library for HILT and library for view model HILT. HILT view model. Since I'm using dependency injection, I'm creating application class. But since it is this application class is using HILT, I don't need to create stuff in it. That will be generated. So HILT Android app. Since I created customized application class, it needs to be inside of manifest file. See, name, dice game application. Also, since I'm using dependency injection in something related to activity, activity should be marked as Android entry point. Here it is, Android entry point. If this part is missing, it will not work. It has to be there. Most likely, it will crash when it starts, if it is not here. Right? So what is next? Our view model had to be changed because now I'm explicitly giving repository to view model. In the view model, where is that? UI view model, roller, view model here. A role data repository is injected into constructor. This is because it's HILT view model, it's add HILT view model on top of it. Inject constructor because this is created automatically by HILT system using dependency injection. A role data repository is provided by, remember, with provides inside of the module. I had in the module, I have a function provides, marked with provides. Are given here. The rest of the code is before, and I think we discussed this before. Number of dice, it is hard-coded to 3 in the beginning, but it is changeable. I have a drop-down list selection. This is the initial value. For not roll it, it's picking 3, and after it is part of UI state. So let's open UI state. You see, UI state contains number of dice and it could be 2 variants of it. Okay? So it is sealed interface. In both cases, it contains number of dice So it is parent. And there are two implementations. One, it is rolled, and one, it's not rolled. In both cases, it has number of dice, even if it's not rolled, because before you roll, you need to know number of dice that you're rolling. But when it is rolled, it will also contain roll data and timestamp of the roll time. So let me do a run of it, so it's clear what it's doing. So idea is similar to downloading data from web, because when we download data from web, it is also sealed interface in several states. One state is loading, one state is success, we load it, and one state is error. In this case, it is roll it, not roll it, and this is shared data in between, because it's parent class. It's not parent class, it's an interface. Why can we share data inside of interface? Because it's not data, it's property. Property is set and get functions. But data is actually here, because you see it is implementing interface. So see, implementation, inheritance from interface. A value will be stored in UI state. Value will be stored in roll it, and value will be stored in not roll it. Not here. This is only set and get functions to access that data. So you see, this is not roll it state, and not roll it state displays this message. When we roll it, it will show number of days. Data in this state is not stored anywhere, because each time when you start, it will start with not roll it and 3. Okay. So the idea is to customize it such way it remembers what is selected here, which will be logically it's user preference, right? Whatever you prefer it to roll last time. So it is user preference. And a result of the roll, if we want to remember a result of the roll, this is not preserving user preference. It is preserving state. And the better idea to preserve state is to use this code, proto data store. It's more complicated. Hopefully I will add this code. If I won't add it, I'll just say, okay, learn it when you need it. So if I add this code by the next lesson, it will be also part of it. Otherwise, it won't. So the idea is to have two pieces. One, it's relatively easy because I already have a code. I wrote it before summer lesson. When I taught this in summer, I wrote that code. I can copy-paste it. It's already on GitHub, just previous. Because a link to GitHub for this code, you see it has fall 2025. And that doesn't have this in the address, just Dice Game Android. It is there. But it doesn't have a proto data store to store result of the roll. So when you open that app from different repository, it will remember that your selection, because it is stored, and it will not remember last roll. The idea is to have both, and to show just data store and proto preferences data store and proto data store. So this is a plan. I will see if it works. Okay. And also, it is somewhat different data because in the Google example is Boolean, in this case integer. It's also will be additional piece. I'm not sure if I want to add settings to math example. For the math example, we can add settings like number of problems. But if we know how to store number of dice, it's not difficult to store number of problems because it is just integer, right? It is the same copy-paste. Definitely for a math example, we can have a settings for difficulty, right? Or if we want to include addition problems or just addition and subtraction or any combinations like division, because it has random combination of them. So it has endless possibility of settings. In terms of what to include in kind of difficulties, do we want to put problems with carry or problems with whatever negative numbers in them, right? So that has potentially it has fancy settings, but of course it requires time to write the code, right? Okay, so